This is Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
All right. Welcome to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host today, Tom Fallbush. And today we're going to discuss what's in the news, what's kind of dominating the news right now on a national and international level, and it also impacts us locally. And there's a lot of news that's happening from Kentucky politicians that are impacting the national debate. So we're going to talk about the Iran crisis right now, the war between Israel and Iran, and soon to be our war, it looks like. And just what should we be doing? What are the dynamics around this? Going to explore different issues, different angles, just big picture stuff. Like, why does America have this, history of being isolationist, but at the same time needing to get to kind of jump back out in the world and impact things? And it's a ebb and flow throughout our history, and we're going to talk about that. Also, Israel, why should we support Israel? What's that all about? And if you're a Christian, for example, if you're an evangelical Christian, which a lot of conservatives and a lot of people that are watching this program, listening to this program, people that would identify themselves as evangelicals who have been raised in the faith and have been taught that there's an important place in history for Israel, and we should support them. And so let's unpack that a little bit. It's like, and more importantly, I'd like to hear your thoughts. And we have a text line, and I really want to I'd love to hear a lot of text coming in during the show, because we're having a national debate on this right now. And honestly, there's no perfect answer. There's no right answer. There's no, well, I guess there's a right answer at the end of the day, because we're going to have to make a decision. Hopefully it's right. But there is no good option at the end of the day. All the options are bad in a lot of ways, and so this is what's the lesser of two evils in a sense. We're going to make that type of decision in this moment, and so it really lends itself for a debate and a discussion, and that's one thing our country is good at. We are good at discussing and debating, and that's what we have freedom of speech. We have we have the press. We have the ability to think. We're all citizens. We can vote. This is you don't find this in other countries. You can't go to China and debate, hey, is China going to go to war? So we need to, this is how we work things out as a culture, because we have a stake in this, physically, personally, and also politically. Our votes, help elect these leaders that are making these decisions. So let's discuss it. Let's discuss it and figure it out. So 502-571-0970, 502-571-0970. Love to hear your thoughts about, should we bomb Iran? Should we also move forward and just do regime change, or maybe help facilitate regime change? Should we support Israel? Should we just let Israel go alone? Should we punish Israel? Should we be against Israel? I mean, these are, there's so many different questions going on in this stream of thought right now that we need to figure out. And so 502-571-0970. Love to hear your thoughts. Let me explore it this way, big picture. America has had a historic, instinct to be isolationist, and that's a term for just, hey, we want to retreat to Fortress America. We've got two oceans on either side of us. We have two neighbors, north and south, that are pretty benign and not aggressive. And so we've got we're pretty self-sufficient. We got everything we need on our own continent. We got all the resources we need. Why do we need the rest of the world? Let's just don't get yourself involved in all these foreign conflicts, and that'd be better for everybody. And throughout history, you've seen that theme. I mean, even our founding father, George Washington, would say that don't get yourself involved in all these European conflicts. Just avoid that. The Monroe Doctrine is all about that. Europeans and the rest of the world do not get involved in this hemisphere. This is America. This is our hemispheric defense, Fortress America. We had this idea after World War I. We went over and helped Europe and defeated the Germans and those powers, and we came back and we suddenly said, listen, we're done with that. We're going to be isolationist, and we're just going to worry about America. And then, of course, the fascism brewed up, communism brewed up, and you had these huge threats that developed internationally that we were eventually dragged into because, hey, they're attacking us now. It's with the Japanese attacking us at Pearl Harbor and all that. So sometimes we don't get a choice in that matter. We can't just be isolationists. They're going to come after us. And if you sit there and let your enemies, your adversaries, build strength, build capability, and if they have hostile intent, it's irresponsible not to go beyond your borders and go deal with it. And proof of that is, let's look at the state of Israel. The state, 1967. I mean, people probably know their history here. That the Six-Day War in '67. You had Israel sitting there and surrounded by all these Arabs, hostile Arab nations. Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Iraq even. And they're all building up these massive armies and running them right up to the border. And they're sitting there and they're threatening. We're going to take out Israel. We're going to push them out. We're going to just go ahead and destroy this country. And we're tired of it. We're tired of how they've mistreated the Palestinians. And we don't believe in Zionism and all this stuff. Arab nationalism and all this stuff. So Israel said, you know what? This is kind of crazy. We can't let them do this. Let's just go ahead and preempt. Let's just go ahead and just attack because we know they're about to attack. So let's go ahead and attack ahead of time. We've got to prevent them from getting the advantage. And they did. And thank God they did, because you wouldn't have Israel as a country. Israel would have been wiped out. I mean, and they know that. They wouldn't have a country of Israel. If you're supportive of the nation of Israel, I think most people that listen are, and most Americans support the nation of Israel, the democracy, and what they've done. And I think it's fair that they're back in their homeland, and whatever. We can get into that. It's a whole other topic. But the point is, they preemptively attacked and defeated their enemies and won that war. And it's a good thing they did. And so the question, so they're doing the same thing now. So that doctrine has sort of played out throughout their history. It's like, listen, if we see an enemy that is stating that they're going to kill us, and they want to kill us, and they want to push us out, and if they are developing the capability of it, it is our policy. We're going to take them out, and we're going to let everybody know that. So people are not confused. If you're confused, don't be, because if you're sitting there saying, I'm going to kill Israel, I'm going to destroy all the Jews, and we're building a bomb to do it, know that Israel's going to come after you. And Israel has done that time and time again, and I think to good effect, and for good effect, for their people and for the defense of their nation. And listen, God bless them. I'd want to live too, right? At the end of the day, I want to live. Israel wants to live. Jews have a right to live in Israel, and they have a right to not be wiped out by a bunch of nuts, by the Islamic nuts. And because that's what Iran is right now. They're ran by a bunch of crazy Islamic nutters. And when I say that, people don't really understand. They think it's just the nation of Iran. It's just this government, and they're just like any other government. Well, they're a little different. All right, you say you have North Korea, right, and you say you have or even the Soviet Union, right? You had these are our adversaries. They were evil. They were enemies. But they had a certain amount of rationality to their debate, to their adversarialness, or whatever, to who they were, and so they had a self-preservation instinct. They weren't there to destroy themselves, and so you could kind of ebb and flow with that dialogue, have a truth, have an engagement with them. When you're dealing with a theocracy like Iran, that bases their worldview on an apocalyptic Islamic religion, and there's a whole theology called the 12th Imam, the 12th Imam, and also the idea of the Mahdi, which is basically their version of their Messiah. It's the Islamic Messiah. They believe the Iranian. I'm not an expert on Shia Islam, but I'm going to paraphrase the best I can. They believe that they can usher in the return of the Mahdi, which is sort of I think it's like the 12th Imam, which is supposed to be the successor of Muhammad, which is going to bring the salvation of the world, and the whole world will turn to Islam. And it's basically this whole, salvation of the world through Islam, but it has to happen through a violent moment. It's like there's going to be world chaos and war and all this stuff. And they feel like if they bring that in, then they're going to bring in the 12th Imam and the Mahdi, and they really believe this. And radical, fundamentalist Muslims throughout history have believed this. And this is not just something that's new. That for example, have you ever watched the movie Khartoum with Charlton Heston? That was about a radical Muslim leader in the Sudan who called himself the Mahdi, and he was basically taking over Sudan and was going to take his army and move into Egypt and take over the Middle East and basically take over the world. He thought he was the Islamic Antichrist. I mean, so this stuff goes way back. This is not new. This is we've been dealing with these sort of, Charlton Heston was the British officer who helped defend Khartoum, and that's a great movie. If you ever watch it, it's true. It just really happened. I mean, it's just, the movie, I think the Seven Feathers back in the 2000s, same thing. It was the whole Sudan thing and during British history in the 19th century. It's all about radical Muslims that thought that they were saving the world. They were apocalyptic radical Muslims. So you're dealing with this country who thinks that. And that's one thing for them to just be a little tribe over there that just thinks that, and they're kind of crazy, and they don't have a whole lot of power. But should you let them develop a nuclear weapon when they really think that they're going to save the world by ushering in a global war, and Israel's the primary threat, and also America is and they're chanting death to America? I mean, so these are tough issues. What do you do? But there's no easy answer to that. And so in the next segment, we're going to discuss, what if you did this? What if we go in and try to do regime change or take him out? What's the fallout? We've seen the fallout over the past 20 years. So let's talk about that. Well, we're talking about Iran and Israel. We'll be right back.
Online at kyvoice.org.
All right, welcome back. We're talking about Iran and Israel and the fact that there's just no good options right now. I'm really curious about what you think, because this impacts all of us, impacts the world, impacts Kentuckians, it impacts your children who are in the armed forces, who may be called up to the armed forces. I mean, if this turns into some sort of global conflagration and we're in World War III, and I've got nieces and nephews, and I've got a brother in the military, and it's like, you look at this stuff, it's like, well, this is not just academic. This stuff really impacts the truth. And of course, we went through the past 20 years, the war on terror here since early 2001, and so we've seen all this play out. So there's no, we've got plenty of examples to look at of what can go wrong by doing this sort of action in the Middle East, by using military, means to address these sort of issues, and something, I heard a pundit make a great point earlier this morning, that he was saying, something we need to also often think about is how our enemies and adversaries view the situation, and how they look at history, and how they look at recent history and what's happened. And so one lesson a lot of these folks have learned, a lot of our adversaries have learned, is this: if you want to stay alive, you better have weapons of mass destruction. All right, because America is no, of course, they're against our ideas, our regime, and so they're against us, so they're working against us. But one thing that keeps you alive is the fact that you have weapons of mass destruction. And here's what they do: they point at Libya, they point at Gaddafi, all right, and they say, look at Gaddafi. What did he do? He went in and he gave up his weapons of mass destruction. Gave them up voluntarily and said, hey, guys, I'm going to play nice. I'm going to come into the world system, and I'm going to give up my weapons of mass destruction. What did we do? We returned the favor by overthrowing him. And he was drug out in the streets, and he was killed like a dog. And so all these other regimes, our adversaries, are looking at that going, well, that didn't work. So, Gaddafi tried to play nice. Gave up his bombs, gave up his chemical weapons. And the Americans still went in and took him out. And so there we go. I mean, so you have to put yourselves in the shoes of these folks. I'm not saying that they're right to, have this, to want to create weapons like this and have their ideology that's evil, and that's not good. You still have to confront that, but you still just need to look at that. And and then look at Syria. Look at Syria. We encourage Bashar Assad to step down, and of course the civil war happened, and so that's another issue. What if we did that? What if we went into Iran, and we encouraged regime change, and we didn't go in boots on the ground, and we just said, okay, go work it out. We're going to knock off the regime or weaken the regime enough where you can rise up, and then. There we go. Then we have a 20-year civil war, or however long Syria was. I forget, maybe it's 10 years. I forget. It's been a long civil war, bloody civil war, that resulted in refugees all over the country. I mean, Europe's demographics have totally changed because of all these Syrian refugees. I mean, it's just, basically Syria has colonized, all these Syrian refugees have colonized Europe and America as well. I mean, you go drive up and down Bardstown Road here from Buchel to the Highlands, and it looks like you're in Lebanon. I mean, every sign is in Arabic practically. So that's because of those sort of issues, and the war on terror. One thing it did is it kind of dispersed the Islamic world to the West. And so is that a good thing or not? I don't know. I mean, you got a whole. I do know. I don't think it's great to have a bunch of folks that believe in Islam in their heart of hearts to come to America, because it's at the end of the day. I mean, I'm sure there's great Muslim people and there have been great American citizens, but if you really believe it, Islam is more than just a religion. It's a political system, and it's counter to American values at the end of the day. If you really want to believe what the Quran says, it's basically we're going to create a theocracy, and it's going to be governed by the Quran, and everybody else that doesn't agree with it, you're going to be second-class citizens, and just deal with it. And that's Islam's history. And so I just just is what it is. I mean, you might be fine people, but if you really believe that stuff, it isn't really compatible to our way of life. And so maybe you ought to go back to your countries where they have that way of life, but you don't like that way of life. You left it, right? Because it's, it doesn't work for some reason. Well, I wonder why it doesn't work. Maybe your ideas don't make any sense. So whatever, that's a whole another topic. But yeah, so there's going to be, we've seen this play out. So say Iran goes into some civil war. And Iran is 90 million people. I think Syria is only, maybe 20 million, 15, 20 million people. Not as many people. 90 million people, that's a huge country. That's a third of the size of the U.S., basically. And so, and then you have, neighbors. They have neighbors like China well, of course, Afghanistan's kind of a basket case, but you've got Russia to the north. You've got Turkey not too far away. What if those countries came in and said, you know what, we're going to come in and we're going to put this civil war down. We're going to go and take over this part of Iran, and then then you have this this chess game with all of our adversaries trying to carve up Iran, and I mean it's I know I'm not saying that's the reason not to do regime change. It's just there's a lot of risk here. This is a lot of risk. We got to talk through that. We've seen it all play out. This isn't academic. We've seen it play out in Syria in front of our eyes. And of course, Iraq's always been you can use that example. Okay, let's go in and let's say we want to go in and topple the regime, and then we take American boots on the ground, and you got Iraq. There's that example. So look at years of occupation, years of basically a counterinsurgency, and just the cost of blood and lives and treasure to do that. So I mean, there's just, like I said, there's just no good answers here. But same thing, you can't let them get a bomb because they're crazy, and they'll probably use it, or they'll empower somebody to use it. They'll give it to some terrorist organization like Hezbollah or Hamas and say, here, go blow up Israel, and don't just say you did it and we didn't, but just go do it anyway because it's part of we want to bring back the Mahdi because it's it's going to save the world. We want the apocalypse to occur. And so there's just no good answers here. And so the fact that people have strong opinions on this, I'm glad they do, but we need to be a bit humble about it all because this is a very complex part of the world. And the military solution, it's a good solution, but it's just one tool in the toolkit, and sometimes it has blowback. And listen, I'm as hawkish as anybody. I'm a cold warrior. I'm all about taking out our enemies, and I've got my favorite genre of entertainment is just a good old American war movie, right? And I'm gonna and I'm there, and I've got my gun collection, and I'm waiting for I'm Red Dawn, man. I've got a Red Dawn poster in my office, and so just bring it on, Americans. We know how to. We'll get it done. We'll get it done. If we do make our mind up to go do something, we'll get it done militarily. It's just the political side of it and the blowback is what we don't have a good angle on. It seems like historically. Look at Vietnam. Look at Afghanistan. We win those wars militarily, but we lose them politically. And so, so anyway, no good answers. I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So 502-571-0970, 502-571-0970. That's a text line, right? So you have to text that. We can't take calls yet since we're doing television. But no good answers. We've got Rand Paul, of course, coming out against a lot of this. He's totally against military action, and he wants to get the Congress to vote on a war powers resolution to actually do anything in Iran. I mean, that's probably not going to happen, but I think constitutionally he has a strong case to be made there. You go attacking another country, a foreign country. That's tantamount to declaring war, so that does seem to have a war powers angle to it. But George Bush didn't get that, and we have a doctrine that says the president has a right to take on these sort of things within a short interim time for peacekeeping and for whatever reason. So he's got some leeway to do that. So, but and of course we have Thomas Massey, the same thing. He's calling out the Trump administration on this. So it really impacts our state. We're going to play some clips from them here in the next segment. And matter of fact, when we come back, we'll talk about how people are feeling about this, especially Republicans and conservatives, about how are they, what's the opinion polls say on what we should do? Just bomb them militarily, regime change, or what? What do we do? Or just nothing? What do we do? Well, we're talking about Iran, we're talking about Israel. We'll be right back. You're listening to Kentucky's Voice, and Iran and Israel.
Back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Republican support is for the possibility of strikes. What's the latest you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, look, what we see in the data, and I've looked at a number of different polls. They've asked it different ways. But the clear majority of Republicans, in any poll that you look, GOP on U.S. airstrikes against Iran, if Iran's pursuing nuclear arms, you see it here. The Republican Party, again, is with Donald Trump, 69% in this particular poll from the Chicago Council that was taken a few months ago, compared to 27% who are opposed. But again, even if you look at the other polling data, it all points in the same direction. Republicans are with Donald Trump on this particular issue, and they're with Donald Trump at large. And when you go against Donald Trump, you go down.
Ariane, thank you.
Thank you
Very much. Sarah.
All right, to keep the discussion going, joining me now, CNN Global Affairs commentator and Trump.
So there we go. At the end of the day, most Republicans are supporting Trump on this, and I think Trump deserves the benefit of the doubt, right? I think most Republicans and conservatives, especially folks in the MAGA world, are glad we have somebody like Donald Trump in there trying to make this decision. And because at the end of the day, he's got the right instincts, and I think he's trying to balance all the different interests here. Obviously, America is in a mood to pull back from the world. We sort of overstretched ourselves, and during the war on terror, and to not a lot of good result towards the end there. I think that there was a period there where we were doing the right thing. We were running down Al Qaeda. We were forcing all the radical Muslims of that generation to fight us in the Middle East and not here. And so we killed a lot of them, and we really repressed that movement. And so I think there was some utility to that effort. And now the whole Iraq thing, you could question, was that good or bad? I mean, at the time I was supportive of it, and I still think there was some positive that came out of that, but boy, it was costly. And but at the end of the day, they're not an adversary, even though they are pretty much influenced by Iran, but they're not an adversary of ours. They're not building weapons of mass destruction right now. They're just trying to survive. So that's I guess the end result of that has been, I guess, better than Syria, for example. But I'm glad we have Trump in there, because he has this MAGA base that has an isolationist instinct now that's very healthy in a lot of ways, because Americans have learned the lessons of the war on terror, that sometimes our elites and our government can overstep and just abuse the goodwill and the lives and the health and the well-being of our soldiers and citizens. The whole Afghanistan thing, you look at that and you just want to vomit. You just want to, 20 years of blood and death and soldiers in the graveyards, graveyard dead, that our soldiers are, and for what? To let the Taliban take back over? I mean, it's just, it just shows that, sometimes that we just don't get it right in this country. And it's, let me just say it. It's the Democrats that screw this crap up. They're the ones that blew Vietnam, and they're the ones that blew Afghanistan and Iraq too. Now look at Obama. He pulled out of Iraq without leaving any troops in there. At least we could have left a base or two in there just to kind of maintain some stability if you're going to do that. So it's usually, when the left gets in control, they just sort of sabotage American foreign policy. Yeah, be it good or bad. It's just they tend to do that against our interests. And so. But anyway, it's complicated. Anybody who says they have a great answer to this is wrong. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 502-571-0970. That's our text line. And here are the key questions. What should we do? Should we do nothing and just let Iran, get a bomb and just let Israel just kind of do what they can do to the point where they can't do any more and just hope for the best? Do we aid Israel in their current attack on Iran, and maybe go a step further and take out these hardened facilities that are under the mountains that Israeli weapons cannot get to, because only we have these weapons that can get to those hardened bunkers that are half a mile down under the. Should we get involved with airstrikes? Should we encourage regime change just organically on the ground without getting involved physically? Should we get involved with boots on the ground to encourage regime change? There's lots of options here. I think the one that seems to be coalescing right now and around the president. I think he's going to probably move the needle on this. Is he's going to authorize airstrikes to take out these hardened shelters? Because I think at the end of the day, and this is my opinion, at the end of the day, if you go through all this and you still let Iran have a nuclear weapon at the end of the day, what was all this about? And so you at least got to go ahead and make sure they don't have a weapon. But the problem there is, can you really take it out? I mean, is this something that you can really do? I mean, just because there's a hardened bunker where we think there's nuclear weapons or precursors to it, if we take that out, do you really take out their capability? Can't they just dig that out, find the plutonium, or the uranium or whatever, and they go just reprocess it, and a year later they're back in business? The knowledge is still there, the willingness is still there, the regime is still there, and so. Is that really a solution? Is the military solution really a solution? Or is it just a Band-Aid or a temporary solution? And does it just cause a lot of backlash? It is not easy. It is, and so anybody that thinks they have an easy answer is out of place here. So, and also when it just comes to supporting Israel, America has had a history of supporting Israel. And I want to get into this in this segment, the next segment, is why does America support Israel? It's complex, and there's obviously the goodwill from the Holocaust. Yeah, we saw the way the Jews were treated as a people group and thought this is just terrible, and here they are with this. They had this movement in this area called Palestine. It's former Ottoman Empire province. It was never a country since Israel was a country. That's what's interesting about the land of Israel. It was never an actual country since Israel was a country. It was always a province of some empire. And so it's the first time it's been a country since Israel was a country 2,000 years ago. And so so all these folks have said, this is Palestine, this is the nation of Palestine. There was no nation of Palestine. There was no country of Palestine. It was always just a province, an area called Palestine. It was either controlled by the Byzantines or the Muslims or the Ottomans or the Romans. It was never a country. And so 70 years ago, they created a country, and the UN and everybody supports it, and of course the U.S. supports it, and they had a lot of goodwill from because of the mistreatment during the World War II, and just their story leading up to that point is just so fascinating. A people group that's more than 2,000 years old, that have kept their identity, kept their language, kept their traditions, and their aspiration for a homeland, and then to actually go back to their homeland and to basically an empty area. And listen, Palestine was mostly empty. It was basically a desert. And there were some Arabs living there, and there were some Jews living there. There were Jews there since the time of the Romans. They've never left. And so they were basically saying, let's just go back to this area, rebuild it. We'll just move in. And as they moved in, guess what happened? A lot of Arabs moved in because suddenly the economy started taking off. And so a lot of Arabs from the neighboring countries, from Egypt and Syria and Lebanon, they moved in too. And so at the same time, there's coalescing of populations of both Arabs and Jews, and it became this cultural battle. And of course, at the same time, Zionism was taking off and getting traction. And so anyway, so we have a lot of sympathy towards Israel, and I think for good reason, because they're a democracy. I think they have a right to be in their homeland. They did a heroic thing by reestablishing their country and their traditions, and they didn't start the wars. They just wanted a country. They were perfectly content to let the UN carve out a little piece of land for them, and they would call it Israel, and they're done. They didn't go in and start all these conflicts. It was the Arabs and people that were like, no, we can't have these Jews here, and we're just going to kill them all. And so every time a war happened, Israel said, okay, well, we'll fight back because we're not going to die. We're not going to die here. We have a right to live. And so guess what? The Israelis won. They would keep winning every time the Arabs attacked. They would win. And guess what? The Israelis would push them back, and the state of Israel would grow. And so we just from a cosmic justice standpoint, you sympathize with the Israelis. It's like you hear this little ragtag group of people that all their enemies want them dead, and they fought back and won. And then and the others a little bit stronger, and they just said, "Leave us alone, guys. Just leave us alone, please. We just want to live here." "No, you're not going to live." And they just attack them again. And Israel goes, "Okay, well, we're going to knock you in the head, and we're going to push you back a little further." And they do, and they keep doing it. 40 Israel's doubled and tripled the size of their country, and it's not because of aggressive moves on their part, right? It's because of defensive wars, and so you sympathize with that, and of course you had the Cold War going on during that era. So all of these Arab countries sided with the Russians and the Soviets, and Israel sided with us, and so that going on, and then just the whole, sort of the cultural, religious storyline here, of Jews returning to their homeland, and of course America being a Christian country, and how we celebrate. The Jewish heritage of our faith, and because basically Christianity is Judaism. It's just Judaism that's just with a New Testament approach to it, with Jesus basically coming in and being the Messiah that Judaism called for, and so we get that, and so you have that interest there. So there's a lot of very sympathetic reasons. But tell you what, I'm going to play this real quick. This discussion has been going on a long time, and it's fascinating. I saw this video this morning. I wanted to play it for you all. This is Richard Nixon, 1992, talking about this topic. So
you make the observation.
We got it. I'm going
to
reset this.
You make the observation in your book, and you say that you have said it many times when you were president of the United States, that no president is ever going to desert Israel, right?
Correct. I put it more bluntly. I said, as I told congressional leaders during the 1973 Yom Kippur War, no American president will let Israel go down the tube.
All right.
Democrat or Republican, it's not an issue.
That is stated fairly categorically, and yet in your book you make it clear at the same time that Israel really is not of any enormous strategic value to the United States anymore.
That's correct.
So why then would the United States continue to burden itself with huge loans, in some cases outright grants, to the Israelis, jeopardize possibly young American fighting men, when there is no strategic value involved, or little strategic
Because the
value?
United States is concerned by more than strategic values.
I'm going to stop it there because we're about to run. I'm going to continue this right after this break, but let's see what Richard Nixon has to say about why this is important, and why Nixon? Because Nixon was the president during the 1973 Yom Kippur War, which was a huge war in Israel's history, and where they almost lost. They almost lost it, and so he understands it on a real visceral level because he experienced it. So we'll be right back. Listen to Kentucky's Voice, or how about the Iran-Israel conflict, and what does old Richard Nixon have to say about this? Kind of interesting to hear. So we'll be right back. graves in front of us, right? And so, so this isn't just academic. This isn't just some neocon fantasy and dream. This isn't just rah America. At the same time, we have a right to live too. And somebody over there is chanting death to America every day. And if you had a neighbor that was sitting there saying death to your family, death to the Smiths, death to the Smiths, death to the Smiths every day, and they're building a cannon and pointing it at your house, I think you would go over there and do something about it. And so if you don't, you're irresponsible to your family. And so this is complicated. And so, as a matter of fact, we got a text that came in. Former Democrat, although I do not wish to see American troops involved, we must stand up to this bully once and for all. They're great for the greater good and of the world. On a side note, I do not see Trump as an isolationist. America first, yes, but he knows we cannot exist in isolation. And I think that's exactly right. I think if you look at Trump overall, he is sort of, I think he's tapped into this stream of America in the sense that we want to pull back from all these foreign conflicts and all that, and so we kind of just roll it back. There's a scale from pure isolationist to pure interventionalist, and I think he's just saying let's just dial it back closer to the isolationist side of the scale, but not being fully isolationist, because look what he did. He knocked out Soleimani in the last administration when he was in office. And so he took on the Houthis. There's times where I think he realizes America still has a role to play in this world. And unfortunately, we still are the world's policemen. We are the power at the end of the day that can come in and actually do things globally. And we're probably the last country that has any moral sense about ourselves when it comes to certain issues. Though I can argue that, I don't know, because the past 20 years we've been out there pushing the pride flag in Afghanistan, like we're some sort of moral heroes here. And so I don't know. So I can argue against that too. But generally speaking, when it comes to the big life and death issues, America has always been a force for good. And so, and especially if they're ran by administrations like this current administration, I think we are a force for good, and so anyway, so there you go. So great comment. Appreciate that. If you have any more thoughts on this, please text us. But we're going to go back to this clip from Richard Nixon. This is from 1992. He's on Nightline with Ted Koppel, and they were just talking about Israel. And I just watched this. I just found this clip today, and it's like, well, that is a fascinating clip because it's right now. That's what we're doing. So let's just finish this up and see what he has to say. Why it's important, or why America supports Israel. So
itself with huge loans, in some cases outright grants, to the Israelis, jeopardize possibly young American fighting men when there is no strategic value involved, or little strategic
Because the
value.
United States is concerned by more than strategic values. That's maybe a weakness, but it's the way we are. And there are moral issues involved here. We don't have an alliance with Israel. As you know, they're not an ally of the United States in the technical sense. But we have a bond to Israel that's much stronger. It's a moral commitment because of what happened during the Holocaust, and a moral commitment because it is a democracy, the only democracy in that area. And under the circumstances, that is why American presidents and the American people in the future will support all out the survival of Israel if it's attacked.
You've always been a very tough, pragmatic man. And I just wonder if you were the president of Israel and you heard Richard Nixon talking that way, or for that matter, heard any sitting American president talk that way, and say, but there's really no strategic value anymore, how much faith would you place in that kind of a moral commitment if push really came to shove?
If I were the president of Israel, I'd put a great deal of faith in it because of the track record of the United States, and also because he would know that that is the way the American people are. There is no doubt whatever of our commitment to Israel.
So, yeah, I guess so. I tend to agree with that. That's the way the American people generally are good people, but sometimes, we are, there's no better friend and no better enemy. But there's a phrase there. Basically, sometimes it's not it's not a good thing to be an ally with America because they'll leave you. I forgot the whole. I'm sure people will correct me on that, but you just look at Vietnam. We were allied to the South Vietnamese, and we let that regime fall. Look at hey, look at Libya. They were trying to play nice, and we took them out. Look at Afghanistan. Sometimes we screw up, and it's usually because when the left takes over our foreign policy, and they have sort of this anti-American instinct about them, and so, but generally, America has that. We try to do the right thing on the world stage, and so I think he's right about President Nixon was right about that. So, anyway. So this conversation, this debate's going on pretty heavily right now. So I'm going to play another clip, and this is Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson. I've been going at it, and of course Tucker's been a little bit more on the let's not go to war thing, and now people have called him anti-Semitic, and so he's kind of smarting at that, and he's had his sparrings with the president over this, and so Ted Cruz is more of a traditional, Republican, conservative, where he supports Israel, and he has a lot of, theological reasons why as well. And so Tucker's trying to unpack that a bit. So we're going to go to that clip and see how this plays out. So,
from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Of those who bless the government of Israel?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of, it says the nation of Israel. So that's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
I can find it to you. I don't have the scripture off the tip of my... You pull out the phone and use the Google.
It's in Genesis. But so you're quoting a Bible phrase. You don't have context for it, and you don't know where in the Bible it is, but that's like your theology? I'm confused. What does that even mean?
Tucker.
I'm a Christian. I want to know what you're talking about.
Okay. Where does my support for Israel come from? Number one, because biblically we're commanded to support Israel. But number two...
Well, hold on.
I'm not holding on.
Hold on. You're a senator, and now you're throwing out theology, and I am a Christian, and I am allowed to weigh in on this. We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
We are commanded to suppp Israel. And what
does that mean, Israel?
We're told those who bless Israel will be blessed.
But what? Hold on. Define Israel. This is important. Are you kidding? This is a majority Christian country.
Define Israel? Do you not know what Israel is? That would be the country you've asked like 49 questions about.
So that's what Genesis, that's what God is talking about.
The nation of Israel, yes.
And so is that the current borders, the current leadership? He's talking about the political entity called Israel?
He's talking about the nation of Israel. Yeah, nations exist, and he's discussing a nation. A nation was the people of Israel.
Is the nation
They're the descendants
God's
of
referring
Abraham.
to in Genesis, is that the same as the country run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
And by the way, it's not run by Benjamin Netanyahu as a dictator. It's a democratic country that elected.
He's the prime minister.
We're going to stop it there, but you can see just the nature of this. People are really starting to question the sort of the knee-jerk instinct that a lot of American Christians and Christian conservatives have about supporting Israel. And what's that about? Why are we called to support Israel? What does that really mean? Is Israel really the modern state of Israel, or is it just like a lot of theologians will say, well, Israel now is just it's just a church. Israel has transferred their sort of identity from the nation of Israel and Jews themselves to the church, and that's a popular belief amongst a lot of denominations. So I don't know, and I tell you where I fall on this. I fall on the Ted Cruz side. I think that the Bible's pretty clear on it, and about supporting the nation of Israel. And you just look at the history of it. I mean, look at the story of Israel. I mean, how do you explain what is going on with the Jews without some sort of something esoteric, something spiritual that's kind of unique? Why the Jews? Why is the world obsessed with this little group of people, and why have they been successful, despite all that, and why have they maintained their identity and then reestablished a country 2,000 years after they didn't have one, and also the Bible talks about that, talks about the fact that they will reestablish their country and they'll actually speak their language again, and the whole prophecy of the dry bones and all this, and that's kind of interesting. It's kind of different. It's like, even if you're not a Christian, you're like, well, that's kind of, where are these other people groups like that? Where are the Hittites? Where are the Elamites? Where are all these little strange tribes that lived 2,000 years ago? Why aren't they still around? Where's the Babylonians? It's, I'm saying it's kind of unique that Israel is who they are and what's going on now. And just look at what's happened over the past 100 years with just the state of Israel, how they keep winning all these wars miraculously, and it's quite a story. And you have to think, well, there's something going on. And why do people just, when they talk about Jews, there's pretty hard opinions about the Jews, right? Either you're okay with Jewish people and Jewish life, Jewish culture, or sometimes people get really upset. And they're just like, they're offended by just Judaism and Jews in general. I mean, look at Candace Owens. She's kind of gone off the rails in some weird anti-Semitic diatribe. And I get it. She's somehow offended by the Daily Wire guys. I get it. I don't know. But how that turns into anti-Jewishness and anti-Israel stuff is just kind of really odd. It's terrible because she's such a great, pundit on so many issues and a great, she's just very sharp. She's a great woman to have in a conservative cause, but she's kind of just shot herself in the foot. And then Tucker, I think Tucker is a bit more of he's playing with ideas and he's using his mainstream media sort of instincts of being provocative to try to, flush these ideas out. And but he's flirting with a bit of, anti-Israel, though he's not. He claims he's not, but he's flirting with it, and so it's causing a lot of issues. So anyway, no easy answers here. Something's going to happen in the next few days. America's probably going to be dropping some bombs here at least, is just what it looks like. And so now what's that mean for the rest of the Middle East and Iran and us, and who knows? But God bless us. God bless America. Let's hope it works out for the best. Maybe the Iranians can actually stand up and actually overthrow the regime. We'll see.